It is 19 minutes past 4, and of course it's Tuesday afternoon. Time for Creation Ministries International, and this afternoon we're speaking with Dr. Taz Walker. Good afternoon, Dr. Taz.
Good afternoon, Mick. It's really good to catch up with you again. It's been a while.
It's awesome to have you on the line again. And look, if you don't mind, I'll just give everybody a bit of an intro on who Dr. Taz Walker is. He's a Bachelor of Earth Science, Bachelor of Engineering with honours, PhD in Mechanical Engineering, and knows a lot about the earth. Yeah, you know, like rocks and things that the flood might have caused and things that the flood might not have caused, all those sorts of things. And, of course, a brilliant man when it comes to asking questions. And a lot of people out there have questions as to, you know, was that big flood real, or is the earth really only 6,000 years old? If you do have any particular questions, anything, even a tough one, send them through to our text line. Just SMS 0401 949 949. That's 0401 949 949. Now, Dr. Taz, of course, the man with all the knowledge when it comes to rocks and the earth and those sorts of things. What are you first? Just give us a quick rundown on Creation Ministries. What is it all about?
Yeah, Creation Ministries is really it's an organisation of groups in about 7 countries around the world, and the whole aim is to provide believable answers, credible answers to questions about Genesis, about the Bible, about creation, about the global flood. And so the idea is that lots of people have questions. You mentioned some of them about, you know, you can't really believe the Bible because it says that everything happened in 6 days and all that sort of thing, and the world's only 6,000 years old. And so people dismiss it, and the Creation Ministries is showing, you know, provides lots of information to show that, hey, it's not actually, it is believable. And when you look at it, you find it actually makes good sense of the world. And so a lot of people really find it very helpful. We had a guy today, I heard about a fellow that when he first heard about creation, somebody came to his church, and it just really rocked his whole world. And he spent about a year just working it through, and it's made a huge difference in the way he looks at life. So that's what creation's about, understanding that we've got a purpose in life, that the Creator made us. We're not an accident, and there's a plan and a purpose behind us. So that's really all what it's about.
Now, I know with Creation Ministries, there's so many of you guys are, you know, your bachelors and honours degrees and PhDs and doctors. And, I mean, do all the sort of creation speakers have, you know, PhDs and bachelors and all those sorts of things?
Yeah, well, a lot of them do, and but not everybody. Actually, you wouldn't believe, but some of our best speakers are people that don't have bachelor degrees, that don't have PhDs, because they seem to be better able to connect with ordinary people, just ordinary Australians. And so we've got a speaker, one of the guys that does a lot of travelling. He's built a huge model of Noah's Ark, and he goes around talking about that. His name is Rod Walsh. Mm-hmm. So, and there are other guys like that who don't, but we do have a lot of guys who have got the PhDs and that, and in a way that helps to add some credibility, but to, you know, the fact that it's not a fringe sort of a thing, but they're people who are well qualified who hold on to this idea as well, this fact.
Yeah. I've got to say I've learnt so much from some of you guys. Of course, you've done years and years at university, and so you really do know the itty gritty, you know, the inside story, and that's absolutely awesome. And of course, you've written stories on creation.com in regards to all sorts of things like, you know, rapid rocks.
Yes, rapid rocks. So I've written a lot about that because particularly rapid rocks, examples of rocks which form quickly, because we get the impression that everything takes millions of years. And for example, opals, we show evidence that opals can form within, you know, a week or two, just depending on the conditions. and also with diamonds. Diamonds are assumed to take millions of years, but there's a company in the United States called Genesis, and they actually make diamonds, and they come out in 4 days.
Wow.
And so they're really gem quality diamonds. And so that really shows that, a lot of people have got this idea that, you can't believe the Bible because the world's millions of years old. And we show that, no, it's not like that at all. There's a lot of evidence that points to the fact that the world is young.
Well, so far you've picked on little rocks, diamonds and gems. And what about big giant rocks like Ayers Rock?
Yeah, that is a big rock, isn't it? I like Ayers Rock out in the middle of Australia. It's red. I've seen aerial photographs of it. It reminds me of a dog that's lying in the desert when you sort of look at it from a distance, and it's got its legs stuck out, and it's just sort of sleeping there like a red hairy dog. But that's Ayers Rock. That's Uluru. And we've heard a bit about Uluru lately, and it's actually amazing evidence that this formed during Noah's flood. Mm-hmm. And a lot of people, it's a big rock. It's a big rock. But there's a lot of evidence to do with Uluru that it formed really, really quickly. And
wow.
When you get up close, I don't know if you haven't been there. I went there quite a number of years ago, many years ago. And that was a time when you could climb it, and I climbed up Ayers Rock. It was quite scary at the beginning. It's so steep. It doesn't look very steep, but it was really steep. But then they had a chain that you can hold on to, and you climb up at the rock, and then eventually get to the top, and you can walk along it. And when I was there, actually, it had been raining for a while, over a period of weeks, showers and rain and that. And there were a lot of pools in the little hollows in Ayers Rock. Just these little pools, puddles. And the amazing thing there were little creatures swimming around in these pools.
Oh, wow.
I think, how did that happen? Where did they come from?
Yes.
But anyway, so that's Ayers Rock. So when you climb up the rock, you can see that it's made of sand. And so you call it a sandstone. It's very hard, and you can see the grains. There's lots of the grains, and you can see that the grains are some grains are quite large, the size of your fingernail, or about that size, and others are quite fine. And so the geologists call this poorly sorted. It's not very well sorted into all the same size. It's got a range of sizes, and that indicates that the sediment has been washed in rapidly, quickly, without sort of being, washed around in a river or on the beach, and sorting into different sizes. So that's one of the examples as to there's a lot of little evidences like that it formed rapidly. And another interesting thing about Ayers Rock, when you look at it, it's got lines. You from a distance, you can see these lines sort of sit up. They're almost vertical, like scratches going up the rock. And when you sit from the air, you've got there like scratches going across the rock.
Yep.
And it's actually what it is this sandstone, or the sand, was washed into the area. And so there was a huge amount of water washed it in. And after it was washed in, it was actually tipped on its end. The geologists call this a mountain building event. So it tipped the sandstone on its end, and that's why you can see the layers sticking up there.
Yep.
And since it was tipped on its end, the top part of the rock has been eroded away, and all the sediment that was eroded away, there would have been enormous amounts of sediment eroded away by water. That's been carried out of the area. You can see it anywhere, and it's all been carried away. Mm-hmm. And so that's what happened during Noah's flood. The Bible talks about a catastrophe.
Yep.
It talks about the fountains of the deep breaking open, and so it talks about the waters rising and continuing to rise, and eventually they lifted up Noah's Ark, and they kept rising until every high mountain in the entire area was covered. And so while these waters were rising, they were moving quickly, they were washing all this sediment into different places on the Earth, including the sediment that makes up Ayers Rock.
All right.
And then later on,
yep, I was just going to say
we're
just going to go into a quick break now. We've got a news and a traffic and weather coming up now, and I'd like to also ask you about the algas when we come back, if that's okay.
Great idea. That's great, Mick.
All righty, it is 4:29. We'll be back with Dr. Taz Walker very shortly. It is 23 minutes to 5, and we have Dr. Taz Walker on the line from Creation Ministries International, who's happy to answer any questions you might have. If you just want to send them through to our text line, 0401 949 949. Now, Dr. Taz, you've been talking about, rocks and a bit about Ayers Rock and how, that's fairly obviously formed in a big flood. And I wanted to know, is Ayers Rock like the algas? Is it the same sort of sandstone? And if it is, whether maybe it was part of the same slab?
Yeah, well, it's the same colour, isn't it? But it's got that red, the red centre colour, and it does look the same. But when you get up close to them, they're actually quite different, and it's stark difference. And I found it really amazing when I went to the algas, to the Catachuca, they call it. And they say, actually, Catachuca means many heads. And that's described by the local indigenous people as heads sticking out of the desert sand. I can say they look a little bit like buns sticking on a baker's tray, that sort of thing. Yeah. But when you walk into the algas, my wife and I went and had a look at that quite a few years ago, and you drive around. It's not far from Uluru. It's about 40 minutes drive, half an hour drive on a coach. And you drive in and you walk in between these huge domes. They stand up about 550 metres above the surrounding landscape. So they're very high. And when you walk in, the amazing thing is it's made of not sand. It's not a sandstone, but they're made of boulders. The boulders are huge. They're the size of they're round, but the size would be about the size of the tyre of a motor car. If you imagine that was round. I can't imagine stuff that's as big as that keep in our backyards. And but it's just full of these boulders, and they're rounded, and so they've been rounded, and so it indicates they were formed in flowing water. The water was carrying the rocks along, and it rounded the edges off, and then it dumped them all in one place. So it's a different area. It's not the same horizon, or not the same level of rock as Ayers Rock, and it's not deformed exactly the same way. So like Uluru, the layers are sitting almost vertical, whereas at Catachuca, at the algas, they're sitting at about 15 degrees, sort of on a gentle angle. But like Uluru, it's been eroded away, and which is amazing. And when you look at the bottom of Uluru, of Ayers, Catachuca, when you look at the bottom, you can see some of the rocks as eroded away, and there's a little bit of a layer around there of a rock and a few big boulders of it. But there's not a lot, considering the amount that's been eroded away. And so that indicates, I look at that and I see, hey, that means that it was eroded recently. It hasn't been eroding for millions of years. You'd have all this heaps of rock sitting against the domes, and it'd be just there sticking out. But it's been eroded recently, and whatever eroded it has carried the rock out of the area, all the broken pieces out of the area. And once again, that fits in with the events of Noah's flood. There's actually, but if anybody is interested, for people who would like to find out more, you can get a free brochure about this, creation.com, and if you type in, say, rock brochure or the brochure or something, just something like that, it'll come up where you can see this brochure and you can download it and print it off, and it's really, really nicely done, nice colours in this brochure about these two Australian icons in the middle of the Red Centre.
Yeah. Now, I'm looking at Uluru right now from, Google Earth, and I'm looking down on those ridges you were talking about. You're saying that that's a little bit like when we drive down the Hawkesbury River here, sort of down to the Hawkesbury River. We go through those layers of rock, but they're sort of sitting up, they're sitting, so as they look horizontal. Whereas these things, the whole rock is flipped up.
That's right. The layers are sitting vertical. That's right. And or almost vertical. And the Hawkesbury River, the ones that you're talking about, the layers are very thick. They must be about maybe 2 meters, 3 meters thick, going through those cuttings.
Yep.
They're enormous. Again, the Noah's flood. But these ones are thinner layers, so it's been laid down very rapidly, one on top of the other, and then tipped up. They call a mountain building event in the middle of Central Australia, and that affected a lot of things. And you can see these layers that are sitting up. It affected, for example, the McDonnell Ranges, the West McDonnell Ranges. You can see they're tipped on their end as well. So the Noah's flood, the Bible talks about, as I mentioned, the fountains of the great deep breaking open, but most people don't really imagine just how big a catastrophe it was, which involved the movements of the earth, the crust being bent around, being eroded off, mountains pushed up, eroded down. It all happened as a result of just the enormous watery catastrophe.
Now, the force that would have been needed to have, knocked all of those rocks over would have been
exactly
massive.
Right.
What could possibly have done that?
That's right. Well, we sort of nothing much happens today compared with what happens during the flood, but there's still a little bit that is happening. For example, there's been some big earthquakes which moved rocks and them up from the ocean floor, some 15 meters, which is not a lot, but 15 meters, and that caused a tsunami in Japan, where lots and lots of people died in this tsunami. The water sort of was lifted up and it came across as a wave and flooded huge areas of Japan. And the same thing happened many years ago, 2004, when off Indonesia there was a big earthquake, lifted up the ocean floor again, about 10 or 20 meters, lifted it up, and the tsunami just destroyed the whole townships and villages. And I think there was, we don't want to talk about it, but there was something like 200,000 people died in that tsunami, all just within a few hours of it. And it affected Indonesia, Ceylon, and even it got as far across as Africa.
Yep.
So that's the sort of thing that happened during the flood, but it was much larger and it was more continuous, which produced all these incredible geologic formations which we see today. And so when you have people that are listening to this, when they go to the Uluru, they walk around it, they'll see, for example, the evidence there. They'll say that it's 500 million years old, something like that. But it happened quickly because it was Noah's flood.
Now, I know that some geologists say, the Earth has been pushing together these giant tectonic plates, and so you get, stuff folds over, like, you look at Uluru and it looks like it's sort of, it literally looks like it's fallen over. Whereas the Olgas, I'm looking down on the Olgas from up above, and they all look like they're sort of the right way up. The ridges run around the outsides, not so much like Uluru. Now, that would say to me that, there's no particular folds in that area. There's just this one rock way out of place, and this rock is bigger than any building on Earth, pretty much. I mean, I can't imagine too many buildings that big. It's this humongous rock, Uluru, that's literally just tipped over. What else could possibly do that? What if I wasn't a Christian, how could I believe that happened without a giant flood?
Without a giant flood. So the flood involved movements in the Earth's crust. So just like we talked about Japan, you get the crust of the Earth moving together, and that's enormous. The crust could be something like, the rocks could be something like 10 kilometers thick, and they squish together, and in that squishing, they tip some of the sediments, they tip it vertical, and some they actually fold them into huge folds, like...
But in Japan, you've got two tectonic plates coming together. Out in the middle of Australia, where Uluru is, there's no tectonic plates. So how do you, if you're not a Christian, how do you sort of... what do they say happened to Ayers Rock? How did it get on its side?
Yeah, well, they say that it was pushed together by movements in the Earth's crust. And so there were tectonic plates back in those the flood, and the plates were like they break into different move into different positions, and then the movements start happening on other parts. So the Ayers Rock is not a rock that's tipped over; it's just part of a huge formation of rock which extends underground. It actually goes underground about 4 kilometres.
Oh,
so
wow.
the Ayers Rock's just the tip of the iceberg, and the whole lot's about 4 kilometres goes down. And there's a little picture of it in that brochure that I talked about, which is called, the Olgas, or it's called Uluru brochure on creation.com. You can pick it up there.
Wow, okay. Wow, that is amazing.
It's hard to describe it over the radio, isn't it? It'd be easier if we had a picture, but there you go, get the brochure and you'll be able to see it.
Oh, I thought it was big enough. What was there? Now you're telling me it goes 4Ks down. It's like, wow, that is one big rock.
It goes 4K. It is, and it went up. It not only went up, and the stuff that was above it has all been eroded away by the waters of Noah's flood.
Yep.
Isn't that incredible? And so you sort of think, where did all that go?
Yeah.
So there's a whole story there of catastrophe. There's a whole story there of just enormous things that happened, and we got lots of evidence that it happened really quickly. It didn't take a lot of time.
And it's so easy to understand and believe that a giant flood could do that, whereas
yes.
Any other explanation just seems so far-fetched.
Yeah, and they've always got problems and things, unanswered questions connected with it.
Wow. Well, again, we're up to 10 minutes to 5. And Dr. Taz Walker, it's been another awesome week, and thank you so much. And we could have just kept going, I think.
We could have. So we got to say goodbye now again, Mick, do we?
I know, this happens every time I talk to you. It's like, hey, can't we just go for another hour or two?
There you go.
Well, I'm sure you'll be back fairly soon.
Catch up. Please. I'm looking forward to that again too.
Awesome. Well, that was Dr. Taz Walker and Creation Ministries International. It is 10 minutes to 5.